Welcome to Mind Shock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and we are already having technical issues right off the bat with the reverb. Give me a second. Yeah, this is really strange. It's actually never done this before with the reverb. Echo, yes, but the reverb, no. Okay. Oh, is it still doing it? Yes. Uh. Okay, let me try something else. Still? Okay. Is that better? I think that's better. Is that working? Is the reverb gone? I think the reverb is gone. Okay, we should be good to go. So, the subject today, and I think the audio levels are much improved even though we had that reverb issue, but okay. The issue today, a lot of goofs are hallucinating that Simone Biles is the greatest of all time, the most dominant athlete in her sport, or in any sport. These are some of the headlines that have been the case going back to the 2021 Olympics now. She is even imagine the hubris and the narcissism at play where she's literally wearing goat emblems. I mean, these are years and years old. So this is before the recent Olympics where she's actually racked up some meaningful medals now. Because before the 2024 Olympics, I mean, she wasn't even top 10 for most Olympic medals in gymnastics. Not even top 10, and there were goofs hallucinating she's number 1. Now, after this recent games, now she can be part of the conversation. And we're going to examine in typical mind shock fashion whether she is at the very top, number 1, whether she is actually as dominant in her sport as the mainstream news has purported, or if she's not, and who is. As always, if you enjoy the MindShock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If they're not coming through, like, comment, share more often. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You can also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. Leave them in the comments section. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Okay, who we got in the chat? Jess Palmer, Jeff Hunt, Patricia, Jean, and Kim French. Kim French says, is not a goat, put your glass on. Okay. So, for example, when we're talking about, and a lot of goofs are hallucinating, she's the best at the sport itself, like better than the men and more dominant than the men. So, Vitaly Sherbo got 6 gold medals in a single Olympics in 92. I mean, in one. I mean, that's called domination. It took Simone 3 Olympics to get 7. This guy got 6 in a single game. I mean, imagine that level of domination. And there are goofs hallucinating that man or woman, Simone is the most dominant at her sport out of any sport. So, this level of goofery is quite common in the mainstream. Now, a lot of the Simone bootlickers, they're going to get extremely triggered here because we're coming with receipts. We're coming with receipts. I know how much you guys like receipts. I'm a big fan of receipts. We're about to drown the goofs in receipts in typical MindShock fashion. So again, I went over this when she quit on her team and herself on the 2021 Olympics because she got a little disoriented. So again, before the 2024 Olympics, Simone didn't even crack. She didn't even crack top 15 for most Olympic medals in her sport. So obviously, I mean, Olympics are the pinnacle of the sport. I mean, yeah, she's got a lot of world titles, but imagine if some goof with less medals than Michael Phelps said they were the GOAT and started wearing a GOAT emblem on their swimsuit, and they had less medals than Michael Phelps, but they said they were better. They were heralded by their own fans that they're better than Phelps. They have less gold medals, but they're somehow better, like GOAT all time. Now, I actually think there was one swimmer who was better, as in faster, and that was Ian Thorpe, the Torpedo, who actually defeated Michael Phelps. So that's a little different. Like, when you actually beat somebody, even if you have less medals, you can be better than them, but not the greatest of all time in terms of accomplishments. Because you have less medals, you might have beat them in head-to-head competition, but you can't say they had a GOAT career. But just, again, imagine the goofery if someone with less gold medals than Phelps touted themselves the GOAT swimmer of all time. I mean, that would just be silly nonsense, but for some reason with Simone, nobody calls out the goofery. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to call out the goofery, and we're coming with receipts. So we're going to examine exactly how many medals Simone has, exactly how dominant is she, and if she can hold a candle to some of the GOATs of the past, or the alleged GOATs, some of the greatest of all time. See, of all time, I mean, I don't know what the issue is here. Is the main issue is a lot of these clueless goofs, do they not know what all time means? That means ever. That doesn't mean the last 10 years. That means ever in the history of the sport. So that's all years. Now, I don't know if just the mental disability is just so severe these days, people can't even grasp the concept of all time. But let's look at her accomplishments, and they are quite extensive. She has a lot of medals. So, again, before the last Olympics, I mean, she wasn't even part of the conversation. She wasn't even top 15. Not even top 15. But now she's actually racked up some medals to be part of the conversation. So she's got 7 golds, 2 silvers, 2 bronze. So she has 11 Olympic medals. She has 23 first-place world titles, 4 silvers, 3 bronzes. That's 30 world championship medals. And she's got 2 Pacific Rim championships. Now, Pacific Rim is really weak because there's not a lot of teams that compete. All the powerhouses are basically in Europe. So those 2 medals, they're not really that significant. I mean, or at least nowhere near as significant as world or Olympic titles. But anyway, that's a total of 43 major championship medals. That's a lot. That's a lot. 43, very accomplished. Greatest American gymnast of all time. The greatest American, but there's other countries out there. Does anybody know who this powerhouse is? Can anybody guess who this powerhouse is? This is Larissa Latinina. a Soviet gymnast. Let's examine her accomplishments. So quite a lot of medals as well. She has 9 first place golds, 5 silvers, 4 bronzes. She has 18 Olympic medals. 18. I mean, that's pretty incredible. That's pretty incredible. 18. Simone has 11. She has 18. She doesn't have as many world titles, 9 golds, 4 silvers, 1 bronze, 14. Now European championships are legit. I mean, those are the powerhouse teams, that Soviet bloc of countries. I mean, those are the ones sweeping everything at the Olympics and Worlds as well. So Europeans actually mean something, unlike Pacific Rim. So she has a European 7 golds, 6 silvers, 1 bronze for a total of 46. So again, just quick recap. Simone has 11 Olympic, 43 total. Latinina has 18 Olympic, 46 total. Now this is basic math here. Is anybody actually hallucinating that Simone Biles is more decorated? Is anybody hallucinating the Olympics are worth less than a world championship? I mean, what kind of gopher is it? And it's actually going to get worse because we have even more receipts coming. So let's look at how dominant these athletes are. So there's only 4 events in women's gymnastics. There's only 4. I mean, Simone has failed to even qualify for event finals most of the time. So how many gymnasts have won medals in every event at a single world championships? There are only 6. Latinina, Kuchinskaya, Torisheva, Olga Korbut, Shishinova, and Simone Biles. Latinina did it twice. Simone did it once. How many gymnasts have done it at the Olympics? Simone hasn't even done it a single time. Latinina did it twice. Simone doesn't even make the list. So Latinina did this 4 times at Worlds or Olympics. Simone once at Worlds. And there are still goofs out there hallucinating that not only is Simone the most dominant gymnast of all time, but she's the most dominant athlete in her sport of any sport. She's not even close to the most dominant in her own sport. I mean, this level of gophery. I mean, what is going on here? But wait, we got even more receipts. I mean, there are so many receipts here. I mean, this is really, really tough. This is really, really tough to kind of... I mean, the people that say Simone is the GOAT, they just watch her routine and they go, wow. They don't actually know anything about the sport. They can't take 5 minutes to do basic Google searches for accomplishments. And this is partly the fault, again, the media hype. And, you know, what's kind of insane is that her hubris and her narcissism. She wears a GOAT emblem on her uniform when she's only even medaled on every event in a single world championship once. Never in an Olympics. Latinina accomplished this feat 4 times. Twice at Worlds, twice at Olympics. I mean, when you talk dominance, I mean, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of crazy. Clearly, Simone is not dominant if she can't even qualify. There's only 4 events. She can't even qualify? for all four. I mean, forget about win. She can't even qualify. She's not good enough to qualify. Now, she did qualify in terms of a reserve. She didn't qualify to compete. She had, I think, the 9th highest score on bars this past Olympics. But just look at her track record here. She's failed to qualify at many different meets for all four events. So how can you be dominant in your own sport if you're maybe the best at one event? Currently the best, not necessarily the best all time. We'll be examining even more receipts in a moment. So again, just a quick recap of Olympic medals. Simone's not even more impressive than Vera Kozlowska, which we'll get into in a moment. Vera has the same amount of golds, 7, same amount of total medals, 11, but she has 4 silvers. Obviously, 4 silvers is better than 2 silver and 2 bronze. I mean, are the people saying Simone's the GOAT, can they just not do basic math? Are they just that mentally disabled? They never learned arithmetic? 4 silvers is better than 2 silvers. I mean, this isn't rocket science type stuff here. I mean, it's really not. Anybody in the chat have any questions so far? Jess Palmer says Ohashi, I believe, is better. I'm not too familiar with that. Is she at the Olympics? I've only researched this particular topic of the GOAT. I'm not sure I know who that is. Okay. So, let's see how Biles stacks up in total. So, how many sweeps has she had? She swept 2018 and 2024 U.S. Nationals. So this is national level competition. So pretty impressive in general, but obviously this doesn't hold a candle to international competition. So she did sweep these all around first place every event. So she's had 2 sweeps at a national or major competition. Now let's examine her Olympic record here. So the 2016 games, she actually podiumed everywhere except for bars where she didn't even qualify. She wasn't even good enough to qualify in order to compete. She was 19 in 2016. 2021 as a 24-year-old, this was her famous mental health meltdown. So she didn't have the mental strength to battle through any kind of adversity. So again, being disoriented in the air, this is nothing new. I mean, every gymnast goes through this. They just have the mental strength to persevere. But Simone, she quit on her team, costing them the gold, and quit on herself. She withdrew from every single final except the beam, where she got 3rd, which is kind of impressive. So if you think like it was, I mean, I don't know. How severe were her mental health issues if she's able to place 3rd at the Olympics? I don't know. I don't know. Jeff Hunt says, looked like someone swept her leg last night. Sweep the leg. Wow. Okay. Okay. So now, and you know what's crazy? Even at that, she wasn't even top 15 for Olympic medals, and goofs were already calling her the GOAT when she wasn't even top 15. See, now, after these games, now she can be part of the conversation. Because now she's got 11 golds. So now she's moved into top 5 position. Possibly top 3 position, if we're only counting gold medals here. She's number 3. So, again, only 2 sweeps. And as a 27-year-old, which some people, I mean, that's kind of pushing the limits, what most people would consider. At 27 years of age, this Olympics wasn't even, she did not have as good of an Olympics as 2016. So 2016, she actually got on the podium for every event except for bars, which she wasn't even good enough to make the final. I mean, I don't know how anybody can call someone GOAT when they can't. They're not even good enough to enter the final competition. So in the 2024 games, she actually did a little better. She qualified as a reserve. So if one of the top 8 got injured, then she would be good enough to compete. But she wasn't good enough to qualify to actually compete without being a reserve. So she didn't even have the chance to get on the podium. So she got 5th on beam and 2nd on floor. Not terrible. Not terrible. But is this truly the most dominant athlete in any sport? I mean, who thinks that these stats reflect GOAT status domination? Not just in this particular sport, but of any sport. Like, who thinks these stats reflect that? Let's see how she stacks up against Larissa Latinina. So Latinina, again, 9 golds, 5 silvers, 4 bronze. So she has 18 Olympic medals to Simone's 11. Now, she does not have as many world championships, 14 to Simone's 13. However, the prestigious European championships was basically close to a world championships, because other than China, I mean, China and Japan both had some powerhouse teams, but China, Japan, and I don't know how dominant U.S. was back then. But the Europeans, clearly much more, European championships are almost as prestigious as worlds at that time. She has 14. So she does have a greater total. She has a greater Olympic count and a greater total medal count of major competitions. She has 46 to Simone's 43. I mean, it's just basic math here. How does someone with less medals have be considered better at their sport in terms of GOAT status domination? Now, let's examine her Olympic Games. So, the 56 Games at 21 years of age, she just about got the podium on every event. So, she got 4th on beam. But she got 1st or 2nd on everything else. That's a much more impressive game. Because keep in mind, Simone failed to qualify. She wasn't even good enough to qualify for one of only 4 events. Now, in men's gymnastics, there's 6 events. So that's a little tougher to qualify for all 6. But in women's, there's only 4. And again, throughout time, plenty of women have qualified for every single event final, like, for example, Latinina. In all Olympics, she qualified for every final. Not just qualified. She was on the podium for every event, except her first Olympics, when she was a little greener. She got 4th. I haven't watched the routines. I don't know if it was like razor thin. I don't really know. Doesn't really matter. In her second games, she still did better than Simone. I mean, Simone withdrew, but so she actually, I mean, she did comparatively well. Less golds, but she did get on the podium for every single event. Now, in her third games, the 64 games, she was 29. She was a couple, like 2 weeks away from 30 years old. Now, 30 is considered quite over the hill in this particular sport. I mean, 27 maybe, depending on the physical fitness condition. But I mean, she's pushing 30. She's a week from 30, and she's on the podium for every event. I mean, that's impressive stuff. I mean, this is true domination of your sport. And again, back in the day, I mean, it was actually common for athletes to do multiple games. It was only with the Americans in the 2000s where they win one Olympics and then they just run away from their sport. Now, that's why Simone's the best American gymnast of all time, because she didn't just win one gold and run away like all these other gymnasts did before her. She went for 3 Olympics. That's why she's the greatest American gymnast. Now, here's another gymnast nobody talks about for whatever reason. And again, how dominant is someone if they're not even good enough to qualify to compete? I mean, it's just such a weird thing. It's just so weird. So here's someone nobody talks about. This is Vera Kaslavska of Czechoslovakia. She also has 7 golds, but she has 4 silvers instead of 2 silvers and 2 bronze like Simone. Now, she doesn't have that many medals at Worlds, and that's for a few different reasons, which I'll get into in a moment. And she has 13 European medals for a total of 34 major titles. And I'll get into why it was so little. But look at this level of domination. She has perfect sweeps. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 national sweeps. Simone has 2. Kaslavska has 5 national sweeps. 2 European sweeps. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, just look at this level of dominance. 8 major championship sweeps. First place in every event. We're not talking about failing to qualify. Simone doesn't even qualify for all the events. Kaslavska has 8 major title sweeps. First place all around, first place on every event. Now, this is the definition of domination. I mean, this is an athlete that completely dominates their sport. I mean, what can anyone say here? I mean, this level of dominance is arguably more impressive than even Latinina's. However, her Olympics aren't quite as impressive, although her last Olympics is the most impressive out of all of them. So at 18 years of age, 1960 Olympics, she got 1 silver, didn't podium. That was for team. In the 54 games, 22 years of age, now she's racking up some golds, and she at least qualified for, unlike Simone, at least she qualified for every event. Now her final games, which we'll get into in a moment, so she's 26 years of age, almost around Simone Biles' age. She's got gold on every event except for beam. She's got second. Now that is the most impressive. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. And if people think, now here's the thing, we didn't even get to her story. Her story is so incredible, tragic and incredible. So she's a Czechoslovakian gymnast. For those that are not familiar with the history of what was going on in the Czech Republic at that time, it's actually, I don't know how they haven't made a movie about her. I mean, she's actually, unlike Simone Biles, like, she's legitimately inspiring. Not only in her absolute domination of her sport, absolute domination, but her political prosecution that prevented her from competing more and racking up more medals. But leading up to the 1968 games, the Soviet Union invaded her country of Czechoslovakia. Now imagine again, Simone Biles gets a little disoriented and is celebrated for quitting on herself and her team. Kaslavska gets her entire country invaded and has to run for her life from her training facility. She's in hiding, trying to train in the forest. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Instead of just not competing, she goes into hiding, and instead of just purely trying to survive, she's training in the forests with logs. She's using a log as a beam. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. She doesn't quit on her team. She doesn't take a mental health break to evaluate some disorientation in the air. She's literally running for her life when her country gets invaded. I mean, wow. Wow. And she comes back, and so at 26 years of age, she has her best Olympics ever. She does a podium sweep. Gold all around, gold every event except for beam where she gets silver. Training in the forest. I mean, can you imagine if the U.S. got invaded and Simone had to run for her life? I mean, she's not competing. She's not training. She's not even going to go. If she can't even handle getting slightly disoriented, I mean, and meanwhile, Kozlovska's entire country's invaded by the most powerful military in the world. I mean, this is so crazy. And she was like the persecution. Actually, she was forced to retire. She could have gone on to win many more medals. I mean, this is her at her peak. That was her best Olympics ever. That was her best Olympics ever. And because she supported the Czechoslovakian democratization movement, they actually, this was after the Olympics, she actually couldn't travel or do public events. She was officially persona non grata for years and years in her country. She wasn't allowed to work in the sport. She was forced into retirement. I mean, she may very well be the true GOAT. It's kind of hard to determine because she wasn't allowed to compete. So, you know, it's kind of hard. And look at just the level of domination. 8 first place sweeps. I mean, Simone Biles can't even dream of such accomplishments. You know, to sweep on an international level, I mean, she can't even dream of that. And meanwhile, Kozlovska's accomplishing all of these things while her country's invaded and she's training in the forest. I mean, that's true GOAT status. So it's kind of hard to evaluate her and Latinina. I mean, it's very difficult to evaluate this. I mean, at her peak, Kozlovska was definitely more dominant. However, in terms of greatest all-time achievements, her medal count is lower than Latinina's. But on the other hand, that's because she wasn't allowed to compete as often as she could have. So it's tough. It's tough. But again, just to add to the tragedy of her life, I mean, it's just, her life is such a sad story. She actually died in 2016, age 74. After the fall of the Soviet Union, she was kind of reinstated, so to speak. And she got the Olympic Order Award, and she was allowed to work. And her son allegedly killed her ex-husband, his own father, in some kind of altercation. And then she became depressed and apparently was in a psychiatric hospital for years. And after about 15 years, she actually somehow fought through it and returned to regular life. No more medication, nothing. And she became a coach. And she actually did a gymnastics demonstration at age 70 as well. But then she got pancreatic cancer. So, what a life of triumph. I mean, tragedy and triumph. And a level of domination never seen before or since. Again, Simone Biles can't hold a candle to these types of accomplishments. Now, for the people that say, oh, well, that was old timers. Now she has like the highest scores ever. I mean, is that true, though? So vault, arguably her best event, well, I guess most people would say it's her best event. Did she really have the most? So again, in the old scoring, perfect 10 was the best. Now the 10's still there in execution. So for example, on a vault, Simone scores 9.3, which is, I mean, that's not even close to 10. I mean, you have obviously Nadia Comaneci. She's getting a bunch of 10s. Tons of gymnasts have gotten 10s, multiple 10s in single competitions as well. And so people say, oh, well, the modern times are different. Well, in modern times, Simone doesn't even have the highest score. Michaela Maroney got a 16.233 in 2012. Simone's getting 14.9s and 15s. Michaela Maroney got a 16.233 with modern scoring. So even on Simone's best event, she doesn't even have the highest scores. So what are we really talking about here? What are we really talking about? And for the goofs who hallucinate, oh, her vault is so difficult. That's why. Let's take a look at her vault, actually. It is a spectacular vault, and she's the first woman to do this vault. This is a pretty standard vault for the men. There's guys doing her vault with a full twist, with an extra twist. So, I mean, again, for her thinking she's better at her sport than even the men who are doing much more difficult things, it's weird. It's definitely weird. Like, a lot of these goofs have obviously not thought through their position in any way. So let's look at Simone's vault here.
In women's gymnastics.
Look at that huge hop too. I mean, if you're a master of your sport, I mean, you're that out of control. I mean, where's her control? I mean, that was a huge hop. Look at that gigantic hop. I mean, it's a good vault, but again, this is artistic gymnastics. It's not just about doing the hardest thing. It's about doing it well and having artistry. Like, she looks like a robot doing very difficult things. And again, like sticking the landing, that's kind of a staple of the sport, right? You gotta stick it. Wasn't there a whole movie called Stick It? Was that called Stick It? It's all about sticking it. She can't stick anything. I mean, how is that someone being dominant on the sport in their best event? They can't even stick anything. And goofs are hallucinating that she's the GOAT. That's kind of weird. That's kind of weird to me. Let's take a look at Maroney's vault here. Let's see if it's got a higher score. So again, for the goofs hallucinate, I mean, she doesn't have the highest scores. She doesn't have the most medals. Like, what exactly is making Simone the GOAT? Now look at that control. That's a lot more controlled vault. Now maybe it's not worth as many points as a double salto, but I mean, that's a pretty vault with a very controlled landing. That is an athlete who has mastered her skill, unlike these gigantic hops that Simone is taking. So she's just kind of throwing these really big moves, but she doesn't have control, which is of course part of the sport. And again, the people that's saying, oh, she's doing things so much harder, it can't be controlled. Well, let's take a look at some of these vaults the men do. I mean, these vaults are so much harder vaults. Simone can't even dream of doing these vaults, let alone with the level of control that these guys are doing. I mean, they're doing much more difficult vaults. And look at the control on the landings. Like, these guys have mastered their sport. I mean, look at this control and mastery. I mean, and these are much harder vaults than what Simone is doing. Simone can't even dream of doing vaults like this. I mean, look at the control here. I mean, this is true mastery. Meanwhile, Simone's bouncing all over the place with no control. Now, I'm not saying what she's doing is not impressive. I'm just saying comparatively. Like, these guys are doing vaults she can't even dream of doing, and they're doing them with a tremendous amount of control and precision. I mean, look at that precision. I mean, that guy swung his arms a lot. I wasn't too impressed with that one. But all these other ones, I mean, look at the precision of these landings. And again, they're doing vaults that are so much harder than what Simone is doing. So again, to all the goofs hallucinating that Simone is the most dominant and best athlete in her sport, clearly that's not the case by any metric so far. We haven't been able to find a metric. Even in her best event, she doesn't have the highest score. She can't even qualify for all the finals, let alone podium in them. Like, what exactly is Simone the best on? Okay, so some people say, oh, well, she's got a lot of original skills named after her. Now, that is true. She's got 5. She has 5. Is that actually the record? Well, actually, no. There's another gymnast, Nellie Kim, who actually has 7. She actually has 7. So if Simone doesn't have the most medals, she's not the most dominant, she doesn't have the sweeps, she doesn't have the highest score, she fails to qualify for all the event finals, let alone win them, she doesn't have the moves named after her, she doesn't have any artistry, she's like a robot doing very difficult things, but she left out the artistic in artistic gymnastics. She doesn't have these high execution scores. She's getting like 9 3s when gymnasts of the past were getting 10s. And some people say, well, nobody's gotten 10 recently. Well, Nastia Liukin actually got 9 7s or 9 8s as the execution score in artistry. So, and of course, total score, like even on her best event, Michaela Maroney has a higher score. So what exactly is Simone the GOAT at? I mean, she's got the most world championships medals, sure, but the Olympics are more prestigious than the world titles. She's got the most national titles, but nobody's disputing that she's the greatest American. So obviously she's the greatest American gymnast. But what exactly is she the GOAT at? She doesn't have the most skills named after her. I mean, I don't see any real arguments other than, oh, wow, she's current and she's winning some things. I mean, it's just really weird. It's just really weird. So she's not the best at any event except, let's say, vault. So she got first at vault, so she's the best vaulter in the world, maybe. But she doesn't have the highest vault score ever. She doesn't have the stuck landings on vault. She doesn't have the control. So where is this GOAT status coming from? She doesn't have the hardest routine on any event, except for maybe vault. I mean, she's not even close to the top when it comes to bars. Let's watch some bars routines here. Let me see if I have them. So keep in mind, so she wasn't even good enough to qualify. She wasn't even good enough to qualify to compete. She was the alternate, but she wasn't even good enough to be top 8 in one of 4 events. I mean, is that really GOAT? Is that really GOAT when you have these powerhouse gymnasts like Litnina and Kozlovska not only qualifying, but podium sweeping Olympics? Podium sweeping. And gold sweeping international competitions, unlike Simone, who can only manage that in 2 nationals, which was impressive. But compared to Kozlovska, I mean, that's nothing. Kozlovska did swept first place nationals, and this is Soviet Union nationals, or I mean, this is, I mean, the Soviet Union is a collection of many different countries. I mean, and that's where the level of competition was absolutely incredible at the time. So it's much more impressive to sweep at a Soviet nationals than an American nationals. She's got 5 national sweeps. Two European sweeps. First place every event. I mean, Simone can't hold a candle to this level of dominance. And again, she doesn't have the most skills named after her. She doesn't even have the highest score in her best event. I mean, think about it. Where's this goat hallucination coming from? She doesn't even have the highest score ever in her own event. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, in no other sport does someone who doesn't lead in any category. I mean, Simone has the most world championship titles. That's the only real category she has. Every single, and of course, Olympics are more prestigious than Worlds. Every single other category, she's not the best at. How are you the GOAT when you only have 1 out of 10 or more categories? I mean, it's just crazy. It's just really, really crazy. So, let's look at Simone's bar routine. Is this a GOAT bar routine? If YouTube will let me play this video. It doesn't want me to play it. Yeah, someone in the chat said Simone was on BlackRock payroll. That's why she's pushed so hard, maybe. I mean, if she had spent more time practicing instead of tweeting at Donald Trump, maybe she would have won more golds. Maybe she would have actually qualified for bars. Why is YouTube not letting me play this video? They don't want Simone Biles exposed. How are you the GOAT if you're only the best on 1 out of 4 events? I mean, it's just kind of weird. It's kind of weird. When you have all these powerhouses of the past with a level of dominance Simone can only dream of. So she might be the best on average of 4 events. So she's not the best on any event except maybe vault. But she's the best of average scores. That's not GOAT status. Not when you have gymnasts in the past who are number 1 on every event. Justin Johnson said, how dare I what? Alpha Omega says, I guess new rules got made for Simone. We all know why, of course. I don't, well, not really. I mean, they're just, it's not like she won. It's not like she won all the golds. She wasn't good enough to, which is the whole point here, what we're examining. If you're a GOAT, I mean, do you quit on your whole team and yourself? Meanwhile, Kozlovska is training in the woods because the Soviet Union invaded her country. She's training in a life or death situation to try to make it to the Olympics, and then has her best Olympics ever. has a podium sweep Olympics after training in the woods when her country gets invaded. See, that's someone in the GOAT conversation. Not to mention dominating 8, sweeping first place in every event on 8 major meets. I mean, that's just crazy. Simone could never even dream of doing something like that. I mean, obviously people have a what have you done for me lately kind of attitude, but that's why, all time means all time. We're not talking about GOAT all around right now. Alright, so I think it'll let me bring it up now. Okay, here we go. So let's see here. See what her bar routine looks like. So she didn't twist going from the low bar to the high bar. She didn't twist going from the high bar to the low bar. She messed that up pretty badly. So she doesn't have that advanced a routine. There's not a lot of twisting when she's going from one bar to the next bar. Oh, there's one. There's a half twist on one of them. And we'll see how that compares to the others. Okay, so it's actually quite basic for such, you know, we're talking Olympics here, cream of the crop. I mean, that's quite a basic routine. So let's look at who won the bars final. I mean, actually, before we do that, I want everybody to see the kind of dismount. So she did a dismount with 2 flips. Look at what they were doing over 20 years ago. Look at the level of dismount they were doing over 20 years ago. 3 flips. I mean, I don't even know who this is. I don't know if she won any medals. But back in the day, there's gymnasts doing 3 flips. So they're gymnasts doing way harder things than Simone decades ago. Can you imagine someone heralded as a modern day GOAT at their sport when they can't even do something that was done 20 or even 30 years ago? This might have been the 90s. Even possibly 30 years ago. You're not even good enough to do something they did way back then. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. It's mind-shocking how goofs are hallucinating that Simone is the GOAT. It's so weird. So let's bring up the gold medal winning routine to compare difficulty. Because if Simone, it can't even in her wildest dreams do anything even comparable. I mean, how is she the GOAT? It's just so, these hallucinations are so weird. You don't get these types of hallucinations in other sports. Like, I really don't know what's going on here. That's why I did this logical analysis in MindShock Sports here, because this level of goofery I haven't seen it exist in other sports. I mean, just look at the headlines here. Actually, before we get to this headline, let me I'll put up the routine of the girl that won. Let's see what she does. So Simone only had 1 half twist when she moved from one bar to the other. Let's see how much she's got. Oh, wow. And look how she connects everything. It's so much harder. Oh, there's one. There's another one back to back. And then a third one back to back. That's 3 in a row. I mean, Simone can't even dream of doing that. Pretty dismount. Also a very basic dismount. Again, 30 years. Nobody's calling her the GOAT. Even though 30 years ago, there's girls doing 3 flips off the bars. So they only did 2. But somewhere around 20, 30 years ago, this girl's doing 3. So how are you the GOAT if you can't even match what gymnasts were doing 30 years ago? I mean, it's just kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. Now, let me bring up, so again, keep in mind all these receipts we looked at. Like, Simone's not even third. I mean, I guess third. She's not at first or second. I mean, the best case you can make for her is maybe third time GOAT. Third place for the GOAT. But look at these headlines from the lamestream media. Simone Biles' Olympic legacy is unmatched after dominant showing at 2024 Paris Games. Unmatched. She didn't even podium on every event. Larissa Latnina podiumed on every event at not one but two Olympics and missed it by one spot on the third. Simone failed to even qualify. The only Olympics she qualified in, she quit. I guess that's what she means by unmatched. No gymnast has ever quit and failed themselves and their team as much as Simone. Is that what they mean after unmatched? But even if that's what they mean with unmatched, what do you mean dominant? What is dominant about her Paris Games? She didn't qualify to compete on bars. She got 5th on beam. I mean, look at the level of domination of Latnina and Kozłowska. Kozłowska podiumed. She didn't even get less than 2nd on a single event. She got 1st every event, 2nd on beam in the 58 games. Like, what are these goofs smoking? Who is this? Leela Moore? Is this like a diversity hire at Bleacher Report? Was this a diversity hire? Leela Moore. Unmatched, dominant showing. I mean, she couldn't even dream of accomplishing what Latnina and Kozłowska have done. Like, what is an unmatched legacy here? I mean, the level of goofery. I mean, this is crazy. The level of goofery. Yeah, Simone fell off. Yeah, we're not even gonna. I don't even care about watching those routines. I'm just pointing out. I mean, people make mistakes, whatever. But even as a whole career, like, she can't hold a candle to Latnina or Kozłowska. I mean, it's not even close. Like, it's crazy. And who knows what would have happened if Kozłowska wasn't politically persecuted. She would have had even more medals. So, yeah, I mean, this is crazy. The level of goofery. I mean, she's basically celebrated for her mental weakness. I mean, all athletes go through situations where they might not know where they are in there. They all go through adversity and persevere. They fight through mental strength. Kozłowska's training in the woods in a life and death situation because her country got invaded. And Simone gets a little lost in the air and quits on her team and herself and walks out on the Olympics. That's not GOAT. I mean, that's being too mentally weak to be the GOAT. And she's wearing GOAT emblems on her uniforms. I mean, look at the level of narcissism and hubris. Again, can you imagine a swimmer who has much less medals than Michael Phelps, much less domination, and they're considered the GOAT? Can you imagine how hard the media would be laughed at if they put out articles about unmatched legacies about somebody other than Michael Phelps? Somebody who accomplished much less, that quit in the middle of meets. I mean, is it really that simple that Simone just works for BlackRock and peddles establishment narratives, and so they prop her up as this GOAT, when a simple fact check will show that she's not even close to the legacy of Latnina or Kozłowska. She's a distant third. A very distant third. And again, there's really no artistry to Simone Biles. I'm gonna play one more video. It's actually a really old montage I saw. I wonder if is it not gonna show up? Oh, actually, there was one more bar routine. I wonder if it was the other French gymnast. Oh, I found it. Let's look at this routine from 20 years ago. Just to compare with with people calling Simone the GOAT. Because Simone is missing all the artistry. She doesn't have the elegance. I mean, she does crazy stuff that she doesn't even stick. But let's look. This is Amelia Lepinek. I saw someone post this routine in response to the recent Olympics that people were saying that this is like the pinnacle and all that, when gymnasts 20 and even 30 years ago were doing much more difficult routines and skills. So this is from 2004. So let's take a look at it. Let's see how this compares. Whoa. Whoa. Okay. So if you remember in Simone's routine, she wasn't airborne for all of that, and neither was the other girl that won. This is back in 2004. She completed that handstand turn all entirely airborne. And on top of that, she performs this flip with an extra twist to catch the bar. So this is a much harder routine than they're doing nowadays. So how can you be the GOAT when you're not even good enough to do what people were doing 20 years ago? It's just kind of weird. And I think that's actually the same dismount Simone did, so no increase in difficulty. So that's pretty cool. We can watch one more video just in terms of artistry. Because again, the name of the sport is actually called artistic gymnastics. It's not just gymnastics. It's not just acrobatics. That's not the name of the sport. And again, that's why Simone's execution scores are lower. She's getting like low nines instead of high nines. Or obviously no tens. She's not good enough to get the 10. Or even close to it. Because the sport is supposed to be about artistry, elegance, and grace, not just doing crazy stuff. I mean, look at how that flows, and look at those landings. Like, Simone looks like a robot, and these gymnasts of the past that scored all these tens, I mean, they look like graceful ballerinas. I mean, look at those landings. Everything's stuck, and where Simone is just bouncing all over the place and can't control any of her landings. Whoa, when's the last time you saw somebody do that off the beam? I mean, just look at all the precision. It looks like Simone's just throwing her body and hope she lands. And a lot of the times she does, but that's not the same thing as putting the artistic in artistic gymnastics. Whoa. I mean, that's prettier than anything Simone's ever done. Was that 2 twists in the first flip? That was crazy. Look at that. A flip over the bar to catch the high bar. Simone can't even dream of doing that either. Again, look at those landings. Just the presentation is just on a whole nother level. Whoa. I mean, it's just so pretty. What Simone does is powerful, not pretty. What artistic gymnasts do is pretty and powerful. But again, just look at all that control. It's absolutely incredible. And also just the expression, like a lot of the dance and ballet that is mixed into the routine. Oh, the chat is hilarious here. But again, yeah, the control is just on a whole nother level here. Just the mastery, the artistry, the grace, and the precision. That's supposed to be part of the scoring criteria as well. It's not just supposed to be, oh, you're doing something hard, therefore you win. That's not what the sport's supposed to be. I'm not even going to repeat some of the comments in the chat here. I mean, just look at that control. And the combinations, too. Some of these combinations where they just keep going and going and going. I don't know if a lot of modern gymnasts can do that either. I mean, the amount of stamina that must require. I mean, some of these old clips, I mean, it's just sheer perfection. I mean, no wonder. A lot of them did score 10s. It's just sheer perfection. I mean, many gymnasts have actually scored 10s multiple times. Yes, the gracefulness and the elegance. Simone has none of that. But even if we look at pure scores, again, even in modern times, Simone does not even have the highest score on her best event. That would be Michaela Maroney. She doesn't have the total Olympic medals. She doesn't have the sweeps of major events that these other two gymnasts had. And obviously she doesn't have the grace or elegance that either of these two Soviet-era gymnasts have. So, like, again, like what's the justification for the goat? She doesn't even have the most original skills named after her either. She has none of these metrics. And people hallucinate that she's the GOAT. And obviously the media just props that up. How many gymnasts have ever won back-to-back Olympic titles? Only 2. And Simone is not one of them. Only 2 have won a medal in every single Olympic event, and Simone is not one of them. Both Latinina and Kozłowska won back-to-back Olympic all-around golds. Both Latinina and Kozłowska medaled in every single event. Latinina is the only one to medal in every single event in 2 back-to-back games. And Kozłowska is the only one to absolutely sweep, not just to sweep more than one major competition. I think Latinina is the only other one to do it. And Kozłowska's done it 8 times. I mean, even if we look at age, again, Latinina in her final Olympics, medaling in every single event, a week or 2 shy of 30 years old. If Simone goes for 1 more games and actually is able to medal in every event, then we can start talking. Was that enough receipts for all y'all? I mean, there's actually a lot more, but I'm going to stop it there because I think, all the metrics we use, the only metric that Simone comes out on top, not total medals, because obviously Latinina has more total medals, but only she has the most just looking at world championships, Simone has the most medals. But obviously the Olympics is way more prestigious than world championships. Obviously she's not able to medal at on every event in any international meet. So what else is there to talk about? She doesn't have the highest score. She doesn't have the most original skills. She doesn't have the most Olympic medals. She doesn't have the most total medals. She can't even do skills they did 30 years ago. Like, what are we talking about here? She can't even qualify for every event. What are we really talking about here? Oh, apparently I have made 1 error. Oh, wow. I have to take back what I said. I did make an error. In 2018 World Championships, she did medal in every event. Oh, I actually didn't make a mistake. I did have that on here. Yeah, it's right here. So she medaled in every event in 2018. So she'd achieved that feat once. Latinina achieved it 4 times. And Kozłowska has the best performance in an Olympics, getting a gold in every event except one where she got silver. Justin Johnson says, you can tell that she's the best by the way she loses so much. Jess Palmer says, these times are the Special Olympics. Everyone gets something for participating. Christopher Allen says, DEI for sure. Kill the Bank says, she's black though. I said it. I bet some of these girls come from places like you saw in John Wick 2, where his old home was basically a slave house that forced children to do things like ballet. Wicked earth we live on. Well, see, here's the thing. I think everybody's giving her full credit for being the best American gymnast of all time. The best American gymnast of all time. The most accomplished American gymnast of all time, though. It's just kind of disrespectful to completely ignore basic statistics. Nobody does this in any other sport. In any other sport, you don't ignore, like, you're not going to ignore Michael Phelps if you're talking swimming. You're not going to say somebody with less medals than Phelps is the GOAT. That's just, I mean, you'd be laughed at. But for whatever reason, I guess people just don't really follow gymnastics that much. I mean, maybe that's it. I mean, I don't really follow it that much. I mean, nobody really follows it that much, I guess. Like, you actually have to dig and you know, spend the 2 minutes looking it up, I guess. I mean, just on the basics, though, on the basic level, if she can't even qualify for every event, I mean, that's tough. She did it at the 2018 Worlds, so she did it once at an international meet. She medaled on every event once at an international meet. And look how often Kozlowska not only medaled, but got first on every single event. So, I mean, the level of dominance, I mean, it's just not comparable. It's not even close to comparable. So, that's it for now. Plenty more to come. MindShock sports podcasts are few and far between, but because the Olympics just happened and, like, again, all the propaganda in the media hallucinating that Simone is somehow the GOAT. You know, somehow she needs to be celebrated for quitting on her team. Somehow she needs to be celebrated for being mentally weak. I mean, it's a weird thing. Now, again, I'm not saying she made the wrong choice. Like I said, I did a podcast when she quit on herself and her team in the 2021 Olympics. I actually said if I had to guess, I think she made the right choice. If she recognized that she was so mentally weak and she didn't have the mental fortitude, the mental wherewithal to push through like pretty much every other athlete does in every other sport, if she realized she was too weak to do that and it was going to endanger her and she might get hurt, she made the right call. She made the right call. Does that qualify her for GOAT status? When you have Kozlowska with her country invaded, she literally ran for the hills, training on logs in the woods, and then podium sweeping in Olympics right after that. I mean, that's GOAT status. I mean, that we're talking GOAT. We're talking GOAT. Everything else, I mean, not really. So Simone is kind of like a distant third when you're talking GOAT. A distant, very distant third. That's it for now. Hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.